Halloween night, 1966. The Mekong River, Mekong Delta. Petty Officer First Class James "Willie" Williams stood at the helm of PBR 105, his hands steady on controls that connected to nothing but water jets. No propeller, no rudder, just two jacuzzi pumps screaming beneath his feet, ready to throw 6,000 gallons per minute through the stern and launch his 31-foot fiberglass boat like a bullet across the black water. The radio crackled. Enemy sampans spotted ahead. Two boats, maybe heading for a supply cache. Standard interdiction. Williams nodded to his gunner manning the twin 50 caliber machine guns in the forward turret. Behind him, PBR 90 matched his speed, both boats slicing through the darkness at 25 knots, their wakes spreading white phosphorescence across the river. They caught the first sampan quickly. The 50 cals opened up with that distinctive heavy thunder, thunk, 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 and the wooden boat disintegrated into splinters. The second sampan fled down a narrow canal. Williams pushed the throttles forward and gave chase. What happened next would earn Williams the Medal of Honor and prove that America's newest weapon in Vietnam wasn't a helicopter gunship or a B-52. It was a boat that looked like a pleasure cruiser, but fought like a barracuda. As PBR 199 rounded the canal bend, Williams saw something that should have made him retreat immediately. Not two sampans, but hundreds. Two entire Viet Cong regiments, thousands of fighters, were staging for a nighttime river movement. Sampans, junks, and makeshift rafts filled the waterway from bank to bank. For a heartbeat, the Americans and Vietnamese stared at each other in mutual surprise. Then Williams ordered, "Attack formation, all guns." His crew thought he'd lost his mind. But Williams understood something the VC were about to learn. In a PBR, you don't retreat, you attack. By late 1965, the Viet Cong believed they owned South Vietnam's waterways. Why wouldn't they? For years, they'd moved supplies, staged ambushes, and transported troops along the 5,000 miles of rivers and canals crisscrossing the Mekong Delta with near impunity. The South Vietnamese riverine force was a joke. Aging French gunboats from the 1950s, slow and heavy, requiring several feet of water to operate, easily ambushed from fortified positions along the banks. "The rivers belong to us at night," one captured VC fighter told his interrogators in early 1966. "The government boats are too afraid to patrol after dark. They are slow. We hear them coming." The North Vietnamese Army agreed. Their strategic planning assumed American forces would struggle in riverine operations, just as the French had. The jungle was challenging enough. Add water, and the advantages tilted decisively toward guerrilla forces who knew every tributary, every ambush point, every underwater obstacle. At MACV headquarters in Saigon, American intelligence officers watched with growing alarm as the Mekong Delta, the agricultural heartland feeding South Vietnam, slipped further under communist control. The statistics were damning. An estimated 60 to 70% of rice produced in the Delta was being taxed or seized by the VC. Supply routes from Cambodia and North Vietnam flowed freely down the waterways. The Highway 1 on water, the main Mekong Channel, had become a communist logistics corridor. "We were losing the Delta," recalled Commander Robert Salzer, an early planner for riverine operations. The South Vietnamese Navy had maybe 30, 40 boats spread across thousands of square miles of water. It wasn't a contest. It was a surrender in slow motion. Admiral U.S. Grant Sharp, Commander-in-Chief Pacific, put it more bluntly in a classified memo to the Joint Chiefs. "Without control of the Delta waterways, we cannot secure South Vietnam's population or economy. The enemy moves at will. This is unacceptable." But the Navy had a problem. They didn't have the boats to fight a river war. Traditional patrol craft were designed for coastal operations, not narrow canals choked with vegetation and studded with underwater obstacles. They needed something fast, shallow draft, maneuverable, and deadly. They needed something that didn't exist yet. In January 1965, the Weapons Planning Group at the Naval Ordnance Station in China Lake, California, issued a report that read like a wish list from science fiction. The Navy needed a boat that could operate in water as shallow as 9 inches, reach speeds over 25 knots fully armed, turn on a dime and stop in 2 boat lengths, carry enough firepower to suppress fortified positions, navigate through underwater obstacles without fouling propellers, be produced quickly, 120 boats in 4 months. When I read those specifications, recalled Fred Jost, who oversaw small boat procurement for the Bureau of Ships, I thought, these guys are asking for the impossible. But the Vietnam War was full of impossible requests, becoming urgent requirements. Word spread through the boat-building industry that the Navy was desperate. In North Carolina, Willis Slane, founder of Hatteras Yacht Company, saw his opportunity. When Navy officials gathered manufacturers in Washington, D.C., Slane stood up mid-meeting with characteristic brashness. "Excuse me, Captain," Slane interrupted. "I have just put into production a very fast, broad-beamed hull, 28 feet long, that might do the job." He paused for effect. "If we could drive her with water jet pumps, we wouldn't have to contend with shafts, propellers, and rudders. That would allow high-speed operation in very shallow water." The captain asked how long it would take to submit a formal proposal. "Proposal, hell!" Slane shot back. "I haven't time for that paperwork stuff. I'll build the damn boat." 3,000 miles away in Bellingham, Washington, Art Nordtvedt heard rumors that Slane was cutting a deal with the Navy through back channels, bypassing the normal competitive bidding process. Nordtvedt, founder of United Boat Builders, had spent years building pleasure craft and military vessels from fiberglass. He knew his 31-foot Uniflight sports cruiser hull could meet every requirement the Navy wanted. But Slane was getting a head start. Nordtvedt called Fred Jost directly. "Why isn't the Bureau of Ships involved in this procurement?" he demanded. "Why is the Unconventional Warfare Office dealing directly with Hatteras?" Jost, who prided himself on following proper procedure, was mystified. He promised to investigate. When he did, he was furious. "This was not proper procedure," Jost said later. "This contract has to go out to bid." Nordtvedt got his competitive bidding process. But he also got something else. Only 7 days to submit his proposal. He didn't sleep for the next week. Working from a single sheet of specifications and a photograph of Slane's prototype, Nordtvedt redesigned his sports cruiser hull on a drawing board in 2 days, then spent 5 days testing modifications. He strengthened the fiberglass layup to handle combat loads. He spec'd twin General Motors Detroit diesel engines, 220 horsepower each, coupled to Jacuzzi Brothers water jet pumps instead of propellers. The water jets were the key. Slane had suggested them first, but Nordtvedt made them work better. The Jacuzzi pumps would suck water up through an intake in the hull, accelerate it through an impeller, and blast it out the stern at tremendous velocity. No props to foul. No rudders to catch. Just raw thrust pushing the boat forward or backward if you redirected the flow. Nordtvedt guaranteed his boat would displace no more than 14,000 pounds fully loaded and still hit 25 knots. His bid came in at $75,000 per boat, the lowest submitted. Hatteras submitted a working prototype that impressed Navy testers with its speed and shallow water capability. But Slane had demonstrated an empty hull. No combat load, no weapons, no armor. Navy officials wanted government inspectors in the plant to monitor construction. Slane refused. Willis told them he'd be glad to build them, but he wouldn't have the government tell him how to do it. Remembered Tommy Henshaw, a Hatteras employee. So we lost the whole contract. On November 29, 1965, United Boat Builders won the contract for 120 patrol boat rivercraft, PBRs. Willis Slane died of a heart attack 7 weeks earlier, never knowing his competitor had won. The first PBR arrived at Nha B base near Saigon on March 21, 1966. American sailors gathered on the pier to stare at what looked like someone's pleasure boat painted olive drab. 31 feet long, fiberglass hull, open cockpit. It seemed fragile, almost delicate compared to the steel-hulled patrol craft they were used to. "That's supposed to fight the VC?" one sailor asked skeptically. "Thing looks like it'd crack apart if you hit a log." Within 6 months, PBRs would be credited with destroying more enemy vessels and killing more VC fighters than any other naval platform in Vietnam. The boats operated in 2-boat patrols, typically with a 4-man crew. Coxswain, gunner manning the twin 50 cals forward, rear gunner on the 30 caliber Browning, and an engine man. They ran Operation Game Warden patrols, Task Force 116, searching the Mekong Delta's waterways for enemy activity. Early operations were tentative. Crews learned the boat's capabilities through trial and error. The first time a coxswain slammed the water jets into reverse and stopped the boat within 2 boat lengths. His crew nearly went overboard from the deceleration. The first time they took the boat through a narrow canal at full throttle, weaving between sampans and overhanging branches, they understood. This wasn't a boat. It was a weapon. PBR crews discovered that their greatest asset wasn't firepower, it was psychology. The VC were used to slow government patrol boats that announced themselves from a mile away. PBRs were different. They were fast. They could race around a bend doing 30 knots, guns already firing, and be on top of an enemy position before the VC could react. The first few times we encountered PBRs, we thought they were just fast American patrol boats, a captured NVA officer admitted during interrogation in late 1966. We learned they were much more. They attacked like sharks, suddenly, violently, then disappeared before we could coordinate fire. Petty Officer Willie Williams understood this instinctively. By October 1966, he'd commanded PBR 105 through dozens of patrols. He'd learned to trust the boat's speed and maneuverability over armor. Against the advice of other coxswains, Williams ordered all protective plating removed from his boat except the engine shielding. The weight savings increased his top speed to 35 knots, 40 miles per hour. "Armor makes you slow," Williams told his crew. "Slow gets you killed. Fast keeps you alive." Halloween night proved him right. When Williams rounded that canal bend and discovered 2 VC regiments preparing for a river movement, conventional tactics demanded immediate withdrawal. Call for air support. Set up an ambush. Don't engage a division-sized enemy force with 2 small boats. Williams ordered the attack. PBR 105 surged forward, bow rising high above the water, twin 50 cals hammering away at 550 rounds per minute per gun. Behind him, PBR 99 matched his approach, all guns firing. The 2 boats hit the enemy flotilla at full throttle. Hot dogging, as the sailors called it, twisting and turning, their wakes capsizing sampans, their guns raking the crowded waterway. The VC on shore fired mortars, rockets, and small arms. But Williams kept moving, never presenting a stable target. The PBR's speed and violent maneuvering made them nearly impossible to hit. Mortar shells exploded in their wakes, always behind them, never on target. The boats made repeated passes, each run more devastating than the last. Navy Huey gunships arrived and joined the carnage. As dusk approached, Williams ordered searchlights turned on and pressed the attack into darkness. When it was over, 65 VC vessels were destroyed, or burning. An estimated 1,000 enemy casualties littered the canal and riverbanks. PBRs 1 and 19 suffered minor damage. Some bullet holes in the thin fiberglass hull, none penetrating anything critical. Williams received the Medal of Honor. But the real story spread through both American and Vietnamese forces. The rivers weren't safe for the VC anymore. By early 1967, the initial 120 PBRs had been supplemented by an additional 40 boats. The Navy ordered more. United Boat Builders was now producing PBRs as fast as their facility could manufacture them, 1 boat every 8 days rolling out of the Bellingham, Washington factory. But the boats themselves were evolving based on crew experience and enemy adaptation. The original Mark I PBR carried twin 50 caliber machine guns forward and a single .30 caliber Browning aft. Crews immediately began modifying their armament. Ralph Fries, a warrant officer who served multiple tours, increased the 50 cal ammunition from 250 rounds per tray to 500, then belted 1/500 rounds per gun and stacked them on each side of the bow. Other crews added M60 machine guns, 40mm grenade launchers, even 81mm mortars mounted aft. Some boats bristled with so much weaponry they looked like floating arsenals. The extra weight slowed them down, exactly what Williams had warned against. But many crews decided the trade-off was worth it. We learned that when you got ambushed, you needed to put out massive fire immediately, recalled Petty Officer Ralph Christopher, a machinist mate. Speed got you out of the kill zone, but suppressive fire kept you alive while you escaped. The Mark II PBR, introduced in late 1966, reflected lessons learned from intensive combat operations. The hull was redesigned. Flatter bottom, greater width, increased to 32 feet in length. The modifications allowed the boat to carry heavier combat loads without performance loss. The Mark I was a hot rod, said Steve Nordtvedt, Art's son and United's contract manager. The Mark II was a war machine. It could handle everything crews were bolting onto them and still hit 28 knots. Art Nordtvedt disagreed with the redesign. They made the hull stiffer and less flexible, he complained. My original design was better. But the Navy and crews in the field preferred the Mark II's load capacity. Eventually, 355 Mark IIs would be built compared to 161 Mark Is. Meanwhile, the VC adapted their tactics. Early ambushes had targeted PBRs the same way they'd targeted slow government boats. Wait for them to enter the kill zone, then open fire. That didn't work against boats doing 30 knots. By the time the VC opened fire, the PBRs had already blown through the ambush and were hammering the positions from behind. The VC switched tactics. Instead of ambushing moving boats, they targeted stationary ones. PBRs conducting searches of vessels or boats tied up at forward bases. They increased the use of command-detonated mines and RPGs that could penetrate the thin fiberglass hulls. We learned to never stop moving during daylight patrols, one coxswain explained. If we needed to search a sampan, we'd do it on the move, both boats circling, guns always scanning the banks. The VC couldn't track us fast enough to set up a coordinated ambush. The rivers became a deadly chess match. PBRs dominated open water through speed and firepower. The VC held advantages in narrow canals with good cover. Both sides developed encyclopedic knowledge of the Delta's waterways. Which channels were safe at which times, where the kill zones existed, which routes the enemy preferred. The technical challenges were immense. The jacuzzi water jets, revolutionary in concept, wore out quickly in the Delta's harsh environment. Sand, vegetation, and debris constantly damaged the impellers. Navy maintenance crews and jacuzzi engineers worked frantically to improve durability. In September 1966, the Navy flew Art Nordtvedt, Fred Jost, and Jacuzzi Brothers Vice President Ray Horan to South Vietnam to observe the PBRs in combat conditions and address the water jet problems. They made modifications to the pump intake design and improved the impeller materials. We were inventing riverine warfare doctrine in real time, Jost recalled. The boats were performing beyond our expectations, but we were also pushing them harder than we'd ever anticipated. By 1968, Operation Game Warden had expanded to over 250 PBRs, operating throughout the Mekong Delta. The boats were organized into river divisions, each division consisting of 10 boats operating from mobile bases, LSTs, landing ship tank, converted into floating barracks, supply depots, and maintenance facilities. The statistics told the story. PBRs were credited with destroying over 2,000 enemy vessels, killing an estimated 2,400 VC and NVA fighters, and interdicting countless supply shipments. They conducted approximately 500,000 vessel inspections annually, boarding and searching everything from small sampans to large junks. "We owned the rivers during the day," said one PBR commander. "At night, it was contested. But even at night, the VC had to respect our presence. We could be anywhere, anytime, moving faster than they could react." The psychological impact was significant. VC documents captured in 1968 included specific warnings about PBR operations and instructions to avoid riverine movement during daylight hours. One document advised, "The American riverboats are too fast to target effectively. Avoid engagement unless you have RPGs and clear lines of fire. Do not attempt to fight them on open water." The boats proved their versatility beyond riverine combat. During the Tet Offensive in January 1968, PBRs provided fire support for ground troops, evacuated wounded soldiers, and served as mobile command platforms. Their shallow draft allowed them to operate almost anywhere water existed, streams barely wide enough for the boat to turn around, flooded rice paddies, swamps that would ground traditional craft. I remember one mission where we took our PBR through what was basically a drainage ditch, recalled a former coxswain. Couldn't have been more than a foot of water. We were hunting VC who'd fled into an area they thought was inaccessible to boats. When we came around a tree doing 25 knots, their faces, I'll never forget those faces. The boats weren't invincible. The thin fiberglass hull, while fast and lightweight, offered minimal protection against heavy weapons. RPGs could devastate a PBR. Command-detonated mines were lethal. B-40 rockets could shred a boat. PBR crews suffered casualties, killed, wounded, boats destroyed. But the casualty ratios were heavily in America's favor. For every PBR lost, the VC paid in dozens of destroyed vessels and hundreds of casualties. The rivers had transformed from communist highways into contested battlegrounds where American technology and tactics dominated. Production of PBRs continued through September 1975, with United Boat Builders manufacturing a total of 535 boats, 161 Mark Is and 355 Mark Secus, plus variants for foreign navies. The boats served throughout the Vietnam War and beyond, with some transferred to South Vietnamese forces during Vietnamization, others sold to allied nations. Operation Game Warden succeeded in ways that larger, more ambitious American strategies in Vietnam did not. The PBRs achieved their core mission. They disrupted VC control of the Delta waterways, interdicted supply routes, and provided security for South Vietnamese commerce. They didn't win the war, no single weapon system could. But they proved that American innovation and adaptation could succeed, even in Vietnam's challenging environment. The PBR was one of the few unqualified successes of the Vietnam War, said naval historian Edward Marolda. It was the right weapon, used the right way for a specific mission. That's rare in any conflict. The boats influenced naval thinking for decades. The lessons learned about shallow water operations, water jet propulsion, and riverine combat informed American naval development through operations in Iraq's rivers, Afghanistan's lakes, and anti-piracy missions worldwide. Art Nordtvedt, never took sole credit for the PBR's success. "It's my crew you want to thank, not me," he'd say whenever anyone praised the boat's design. He died in 2013 at age 91, having lived to see his creation become legendary. Willie Williams, the sailor who proved what PBRs could do that Halloween night in 1966, passed away in 1999. His Medal of Honor citation reads simply, "For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty." But the real legacy of the PBR wasn't awards or statistics. It was the transformation of the Mekong Delta from a VC sanctuary into contested ground where American forces could operate with confidence. It was the psychological impact of boats that struck like lightning and vanished like ghosts. It was proof that in unconventional warfare, sometimes the answer isn't bigger guns or more troops. It's faster boats with better tactics. The Viet Cong had owned the rivers, until they didn't.